All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. In your notes, can I get you put down the title of today's lesson, lesson 19, and it's Challenges to Globalization. And I purposely don't have it on the whiteboard because I want to have some discussions without you just looking ahead and seeing where this lesson is taking us. So I want you to be uncompromised by where the planning has taken me, and you come up with some original thought. So challenges to globalization is our focus this week. We have 4 days together. So at the end of the week, I want you to be able to make some conclusions about, to what extent does globalization unlock a good life for us, but to what extent does globalization create some challenges for us. So let's begin by looking at that. If the question of this week, the umbrella question of the week was, to what extent does globalization provide, a good life for us or unlock a good life? What would be the first thing you'd naturally have to look at? To what extent does globalization unlock a good life for us? If that was your term project, then what might be the first step that you would take? To what extent does globalization unlock a good life? If I assign this as a project, a term project, what might you want to do as your first step jumping in? Yes?
Define what a good life means.
Define what a good life means, right? It's an excellent point, and that is what I was searching for, so good work. So if the term project was, to what extent does globalization unlock a good life, logically a student would say, okay, wait a minute, well, what's a good life? How do we define that? So I want you to leave here this week understanding better the complexity surrounding the term good life. So thinking of some of the cast of characters that we've encountered this year, do we have any ideological perspectives, any points of view about a good life? How might character X define good life? So think of a character that we've studied and then say, okay, according to this person, they would define good life as this because these are their values, right? This is what they think is most important. Yes?
Sparta would define it as like a good life. If you served Sparta, then you lived a good life.
From a Spartan perspective, a good life is defined through service to your city-state. So how do you define a good life? Spartans defined it through service. It wasn't about human rights. It was about a responsibility to the collective. That's it. That's a good application of good life. So, from a Spartan perspective, you could examine the global village of today and say, to what extent does globalization provide opportunities for service to our greater community? And if you believe that globalization is promoting the values of service to others first, then you might say from a Spartan perspective, globalization has unlocked a good life because we are witnessing many examples of service. That when we connect with others, the thing that is being promoted most is these are opportunities to help others and to serve the group. Staying with the idea of service for a moment. Ideologically, if there's a family of philosophers around the idea that a good life is defined by serving others, do we know any other characters from this year that would fit into that family, that school of thought? That their value is that a good life is by helping others. Any individuals we've seen this year that would promote that idea? Yes?
Was it Robert Owen?
Robert Owen would. Remember, Robert Owen owned a factory in New Lanark in Scotland during the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, during the early 19th century. And Robert Owen was a capitalist by trade, but he had a collectivist heart, that he believed that the profit that his workers made for him should be shared back with his workers. And he provided them health care and education and leisure activities, affordable housing, affordable goods at the company store, provided them shorter work days, And this was a revolution of thinking. And most capitalists at the time, capitalists by trait, were not socialists by heart. So we have Spartans that would say a good life is by serving the group, keeping the city-state safe. Somewhat similarly, Robert Owen would say it is about service, but there's this idea about helping others economically and socially to elevate their position, that those living in poverty might need our help. Any other philosophers or individuals that we've encountered this year that might give us some insight into what is a good life? What is a good life? Yes?
Adam Smith would say that a good life is like an open free market without the government.
Yeah, so Adam Smith would argue that a good life can be defined by having freedom from government. And in that absence of government, we'll be guided by our invisible hand, which is greed, self-interest. And self-interest will unlock the good life, as we will take an interest in our own well-being, our own fortune. And we will find something, a niche, in the marketplace that will reward us enough to live the life we want. So, to Adam Smith's perspective, a good life is an economic measurement, one that is achieved through the individual self-interest. That's different than Robert Owen, right? Robert Owen was saying that we have a responsibility for others. And Adam Smith is suggesting that we need to take more interest in our own well-being. Now, Adam Smith wasn't saying that we don't help others, but by helping ourselves, we help others. By you wanting to make $150,000 a year, maybe you'll become a doctor. And by being a doctor, you'll be providing medical help for your community. So by serving yourself, you serve others. That the invisible hand of greed can unlock a broad-based prosperity. So a capitalist, Elon Musk, might say, I want to be wealthy. So he looks into the marketplace and finds a niche. Electric vehicles, an untapped market. Suddenly Tesla's the biggest car company selling electric vehicles, worth more than $1 trillion. Because he looked in, found a niche that no one or not enough people were addressing, addressed it, made a fortune, but at the same time, he's created prosperity for others. Because now there's electric vehicles that people can buy, and potentially that can create prosperity in many ways, including changing our ecological footprints. So we have different definitions of a good life. We have a capitalist, we have a socialist, we have somebody that submits to the authority of the state, a Spartan. And depending upon which perspective you take, you may have a different conclusion about to what extent does the global village or globalization provide a good life. Michael Walker says that the global village is providing a good life. Because Michael Walker works with the Fraser Institute. And remember his quote was that because of globalization, people have the 10 cents an hour that they need to buy the rice that their family needs to survive. So his definition of a good life is having rice. I'm not sure Michael Walker himself would be happy with just having rice for dinner. But from his capitalist perspective, transnationals who locate in developing countries are godsends because they are providing employment opportunities. So to what extent does globalization unlock a good life? Well, from Michael Walker's perspective, it unlocks a good life because it provides 10 cents an hour. And that's enough money to eat rice. Now there's got to be someone that we've encountered this year that might add some insight into Walker's observations. Is having rice enough to have a good life? Who have we encountered in our cast of characters that would give us insight into how do we measure a good life?
I wonder if it has something to do with quality of life, like having a good life politically, economically, like socially. But I can't remember.
There's many dimensions to well-being, right?
Yeah.
So it's not just economic. There might be a social, a political dimension. If you had to measure a country and say the citizens in this country have a good life, have we encountered anybody that might be able to help us measure their good life? Some of you used this individual in your last essay. Some of you are planning to use them in your next essay. This individual has talked to us, yes?
Is it Maslow?
It is 100% Maslow. So Maslow is saying that there's hierarchies, right? There's a hierarchy of our needs. And as we fulfill one tier, we can move on to the next tier. And the basic needs are the physiological needs, like shelter and food, water and air. And therefore, Michael Walker is saying 10 cents an hour is a good life for workers in the developing world because then they have the rice to eat. Would you quantify a good life by being on the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy? Well, my physiological needs are met, I have a good life. You have a lot of new experiences and growth waiting for you in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Your lives are going to change a lot. So, in 12 and a half years, if you go to a 10-year high school reunion and you bump into each other, I already see you guys shaking your heads like I'm not going to go to that. But let's say you wanted to go to that and you bumped into each other. How would you make a conclusion as to who has a good life? If somebody came and they're like, you know what, I have enough money each day to provide rice for my family to eat, would you be like, man, you know what, Joey's having a good life? How would you measure a good life? What are the characteristics of a good life? This is an open question, meaning you don't have to say from Smith's perspective or Marx or Owen or from a Spartan perspective or an Athenian perspective, a realist perspective. I want you to think about if we were trying to create like a recipe for cookies, right? Then there's like this much butter, this much flour. What's your recipe for a good life? Because my assumption is a good life is what you want. That's my assumption, is that's your goal, is that you want a good life. So you must have some thoughts as to what it's going to take to achieve that, and then what that accomplishment will look like. How will you be able to look around and say, you know what, I have a good life? How do we quantify that? Is it Adam Smith? Is it I have enough economic freedom that I can buy any goods that I want? And if that's our most important value, then if we put the economy ahead of all other things, then a lot of the things right now that we're canceling, we're saying that are wrong in history, if they help the economy, then we should be saying, no, those are the right things to do. So how do you measure a good life? How do you measure a good life? Yes?
There's a book I'm reading. It's called To Be Taught If Forgotten. And the main character, she says that in the year 2020, mankind stopped pursuing space. So space and and exploration like that, because they realized, how can we solve the questions of what's out there if we can't solve the questions of our own society? Like we can't solve how to deal with scarcity and the ecological issues, right? And what was I going to say? I can't remember. I had a point to get to.
It was good.
Oh yeah, but I feel like I agree with that in a sense of if like, if you've reached a point where there's nothing more you can do to improve yourself, then you should be, and you can start to help and help others achieve, right? Like,
Mhm.
once you are physiologically and like mentally and emotionally have bettered yourself, I feel like then you can help others. And so I feel like at that stage where you can start to help others
Mhm.
and not have to worry about how it affects you, that's kind of a good life.
That's a good life.
Yeah.
It's a good life when you're at a point you can help others. So,
And the reason I tie that to the book is because once they have fixed what's on Earth, then they can start to go and see what's out in space, right?
right. But you shouldn't go to space until, home
Mhm.
base looks good. Everybody's needs are met here. As an aside, I have a cartoon at the end of this week's class or lesson that fits into exactly what you're talking about. The cartoon's from the 60s when it says, what about the space between races of man? Instead of spending money in the 60s trying to get to the moon, the space race, why not deal with the poverty that the humanity on Earth is feeling? So this is a cartoon from the 60s during the Apollo mission that fits in exactly with what you just talked about. But let's go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs then for a minute. What tier in Maslow's hierarchy of needs are you talking about when, I can help others because my needs are met? I'm at a position where I'm comfortable that I no longer have to worry about, my next pair of shoes, no longer have to worry about, will I be able to pay my electrical bill? Now that I have these things taken care of, now is an opportunity to ensure that other people have shoes and their electrical bill is paid for. So in terms of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where would you see that? So if you can't remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs, maybe I'll bring it up. So we have ads, of course. We have physiological needs at the bottom. Air, water, food, shelter, sleep, clothing, reproduction. Safety needs, love and belonging, esteem, self-actualization. At which of these tiers do you believe we'd have to be in order to be able to assist others? Yes.
I think it has to be the highest one.
The highest one, self-actualization. Desire to become the most that one can be. So it's hard to help others if you don't feel free. It's hard to help others if you don't feel respected. It's hard to help others if you don't have a sense of family or connection. You're probably not going to help others if you don't feel connected to them, right? So it's definitely got to be passed here. And you have to feel safe and secure, and definitely your physiological needs need to be met. Yes?
When you're on a plane ride, they tell you to put when you're in danger, to put your mask on and then assist others with putting their mask on.
Exactly.
Because you can't help them if you're not safe already either.
Excellent point. And excellent, hypothetical or evidence that shows an internalization what we're talking about. So the concept is, how do we measure a good life? And then beyond that, at what point would we be ready if a good life is having the ability to help others? What are some characteristics of being at that point, of being able to help others? Maslow's might say it's through self-actualization. So if self-actualization is the key to a good life, and then once we have a good life, we can help others, then shouldn't society be trying to help us get to self-actualization? Shouldn't that be the focus of our society? If we need you to get to that point to have a good life so you can help others, shouldn't we be trying to get you there? And if so, there's probably some things in education that are very wasteful. It's probably a way to restructure school so that you can be here. So if you could control your own curriculum, control your own schedule, what things might you add to your curriculum? What might be some things you would take away so that you'd feel more self-actualized at the end of the day? Is there a course that you're mandated to take and you're like, I just don't see the need? Or is there a course that you would love to study, but you don't have the opportunity? how could education actually help unlock your self-actualization so you could have a good life? What's missing in school? What is it that you actually want to study so that through that you might have a desire to become the most that one can be? It's a tough question when you're 15 or 16 years old. So in order to answer that question, you might want to think to yourself, what is it that I want to be? And in order to answer that question, you might want to ask yourself, what is it that that I want my day to look like? What is it that I want my time? If time is our most valuable resource, then how do I want to be spending said time?
Our day to look like right now at this age, or day to look like in the
Both,
future?
both, yeah. So if we're saying like in the future I want to do this, then what can we be doing now to get there, right? So how do we change your curriculum now so you can have self-actualization later? Again, it comes back down to good life. At your 10-year high school reunion, is it the person in the room that's wealthiest? Do they have the best life? Or is it the person that maybe is the poorest economically, but they have the biggest family? Is that a good life? Yes.
Neither is, because they're not fulfilling all of their needs.
Okay. Right? So it's not just money, it's not just family. There's more to it. So what can we do in public education to help unlock self-actualization? Yes.
I've always, like, every time we've had a talk, we talked about education, I've always answered as, like, after people can make decisions for themselves, I think we should encourage people to be more curious and have, like, an open range of, like, courses that they want to take, right? Because right now there's things that are mandatory that people aren't, like, curious about, that they don't want to take. Like, social studies is necessary to go to university.
Yeah. Social, English,
but
math,
some people
science.
don't even want to pursue anything in social studies.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. So, and we'll get to your point in a second. Where would your curiosity lead you? What's your rabbit hole that you'd like to go into? Or are you just no longer curious? It must have been a time when you were. When you were always asking why and what and how. If you're not asking those questions anymore, we failed you. Yeah.
2 points. One to add on to what you just said first. Last year at SHS, I think we were going to have a point where we invited like people who were, working as an artist as a career, or people who were lawyers.
Right.
Like, you could ask like some people to invite, for the school to invite in, so you could talk to them about like what their job is like, how you could possibly reach that. And I felt like that was a really good idea, but I think we didn't get to do it because of COVID interfered with it. And I feel like
Seems
more
right.
of that in schools would
Yeah.
be really cool, because if you're happy with your job, you'd be like, oh hey, yeah, of course, I'm gonna come in and talk to it.
Good
people,
spokesperson,
And then people who are kids get to see more of that, and they get to be introduced to that, and they could be, okay, yeah, this might actually be something I'm interested in,
If you guys had to make a list of how many jobs you're aware of, how long would that list be?
And then the other thing I wanted to say was that you said that, I said earlier that neither the person who's wealthy or the person who has family
Right.
is living a full life. And I wanted to expand on that and say that, imagine it's like a puzzle. Some of the wealthy people have some of the pieces,
Yeah.
but it's not the full puzzle. And the person with the family has some of the pieces, but it's not the full puzzle. They won't have a full,
So
complete life.
maybe they could trade some money for kids, and then they both can have a full puzzle. Kids for sale. I was sold on a Monday.
Yeah, but it's not a complete life unless you have the full puzzle, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna also say that I think a lot of like curiosity stopping is in our homes, and I think we have to teach like new parents how to properly encourage their kids to pursue what they want. Because if you talk to a lot of the students here, they want to be like nurses or doctors just because their parents told them that was the right thing.
Right.
You're expected to.
You're expected to.
Well, also, like, if you're not, I don't know, like in my family, it's kind of like, if you're not something, like, if you're like a doctor or dentist, like, I just have, like, cousins that are going to be like that.
Yeah.
Like, anything that, like, isn't necessarily, like, that high, like, status isn't considered, like, good.
Honorable or
Yeah.
worthy or,
Yeah.
yeah. Like, so within the family unit, you'll judge each other's life and say, well, this person has a good life because they're a doctor or a
Yeah.
dentist. This person doesn't have a good life because, they're working at Beans and, serving coffee. But at the end of the day, maybe the barista at Beans is more happy and has more free time. And if time is our ultimate resource, then a doctor who works 80 hours a week, maybe that's not the best life. We do need more doctors, though.
That just made me think of another way for the puzzle
I like your puzzle metaphor.
Is that what Anoop said about there, and you expand on it, about how you only see like the good things that other people have in their life. You're looking at the puzzle at an angle, so it looks like it's completed. You see the pieces on the table, but you're not looking at it head on.
Right.
So there's empty spaces.
So from the side, it looks great, but all you're seeing is a facade, right? And then when you look deeper, then that person who you think is thriving is maybe quite lonely or quite stressed. All right, that's some good insight. Now, how does globalization get in the way of a good life? So if a good life, and we obviously we didn't define it concretely, but we said good life is an opportunity to help others. And in order to do that, we must be self-actualized. How is globalization getting in the way of this? What are the threats, the challenges within globalization that because we're globalized, you might not have a chance for a good life? Yes?
I feel like we can connect that back to a news thing where it's like the different hierarchies of the status, but globalization also plays into that because like if you're a person that doesn't know how to speak English, you're most likely not going to get into like a prestigious medical school, and it prevents you from becoming what you want to be.
Yeah.
So since we're so globalized, we have like this. English is the like majority language, and it feels like we're required to know that to be like worthy, right?
And with language comes culture. And if we become one global language, English, and we become Anglophones, then sometimes we'll lose some other cultural attributes. And some that might be more important to have a sustainable future. So, yeah, self-actualization. Can you achieve that if you've been assimilated? Can you achieve self-actualization if we have global homogenization? If you've lost your connection to your culture? Can you have self-actualization, or are you stuck because you don't have a sense of connection to your ancestors and your family? That's tough. Yep.
To expand on that, it made me think of the Booth's theory of socioeconomic unfairness. You ever heard of that?
No.
Where oh, okay, I saw it once. I just looked it up right now just to make sure. So a man can earn $38 a month plus allowances, and a really good pair of leather boots that would last like years cost $50. But an an affordable pair of boots that would fall apart in a season or two costs $10. And so he can only afford the cheap things. And if he had a raise, if he had more money, then he'd be able to afford the more expensive thing that would last longer. So he could focus on other things, and he wouldn't be able to reach that self-actualization because of his status, and being poor, he can't meet his safety and physiological needs, right?
So based on that, you'd be a proponent of a global minimum wage that would allow people to buy those $50 boots, so then they can focus on more important things than just having to buy another pair of boots because these ones are worn out again.
Yeah. I didn't explain that super perfectly, but if you search up Booth's theory of socioeconomic unfairness, you can get it. Really
I think it makes sense to me.
Okay.
Any other challenges that because of globalization, your lives have been challenged? Yes.
I feel like it's less of a challenge towards us, I guess, in our class. Like there are challenges for us, but I feel like there's more challenges towards people who can't meet those needs. Whereas a lot of us, I'm not saying all of us, I'm not speaking for all of us, but a lot of us can meet most or at least a little bit of each of those needs. Not
Yeah, we're not struggling
as much. for
as much.
physiological needs.
There are people in our community that do, obviously.
Mhm.
But for the most part, most of our days, we're at least up here.
Mhm.
But it would be hard to focus on issues of here when you're hungry or when you're sleep deprived because you don't have shelter that allots you that comfort to have a good night's sleep. Yes?
I mentioned this in my essay about how greed is defined wrongly, where we want more and more and more, and forget that we have to help people. And I mentioned how like greed has to be redefined as like we want more people to feel secure instead of I want more money
Mm-hmm.
or like I want more like houses or whatever. I think that that's a challenge that we face today is the way we define greed because it leaves a lot of people like at the bottom. It prevents them from like going above the poverty line, so they can't meet those needs.
Yeah. I'd agree. Okay, I'm going to stop it there.